We will obviously begin from where we had left off in the last class, and that was we were reading about the representations of the natives in Rudyard Kipling's Kim. So let's continue with that, and then we will move on to the psychoanalysis or part psychoanalysis, and this all any theories applied to the novel is not devoid of the Oriental critique. You must remember that কোনো রকমেরই perspective will not be devoid of any Oriental or the Orientalist approach. The theory, I am talking about the theory, the Orientalist approach. No other theory will be devoid of it. So this screen that you see in front of you, Kipling's within brackets and Kipling's consciousness, because according to psychoanalysis, Freudian psychoanalysis bolo, if we talk about Lacanian psychoanalysis, if we talk about that of Slavoj Zizek, all of these, for them the consciousness is not without the subconsciousness. So the conscious being is not without the subconscious being, his own subconscious being. So that's why I have put it like that. The sub is within brackets, and we will be talking about Kipling's consciousness, but bracketing the subconsciousness, that is, we know that it is inclusive of the study within the study of psychoanalysis. So first let's quickly finish with the representation of the natives, and then we will move on. Just give me 1 second. Yes, I hope you can see. There's a Word document in front of you. So we will continue from the last class. I had already discussed a few points, so let's move on. So here it is said that saying that natives are described as treacherous and liars, and Orientalists view that Orientals are inveterate liars. Said himself mentions this in his book Orientalism. And throughout the novel, native characters are there either liars or treacherous or both. And we have one example that you see in front of you in the very beginnings of the novel, that is in chapter 1 itself. Kim says to another person that this may serve for farmers, but I live in the city of Lahore. It was cleverly done, Babu. Now give the ticket to Umbala. So this person, this sleepy clerk, was supposedly giving him a wrong ticket, to which Kim opposes, or to which Kim answers so. And what is his answer? Look at the way he takes his stand. He says that was cleverly done, Babu, as if that is the inevitable characteristic trait of a Babu, which is also a pun applied to the educated Indians of that time. And the Babus, though they work for the British rule, they are not viewed to be trustworthy either. So they are either characters to whom treachery and lies are attributed to the most, or they are betrayers and they are disloyal. And it is stated in a very general way throughout the novel. And Kim, though he is white, has learned to lie, as also stated in the novel, because we can see that Kim could lie like an Oriental. So here again we establish the ambivalent character of Kim that we have in front of us, which is more so like the ambivalent character of the author himself, Kipling, because as we will learn today, Kipling was actually trying to adjust to his own ambivalent role, because he was both a supporter of the imperialism, as he was a representative of that colonial imperialism, the project of imperialism. And this is also true that it was an undeniable fact that Kipling had lived in India for a very, very long time. And that gave him certain very natural attributes of the Indian soil, which gave him the ambivalent character wherein the white colonizer is also undergoing a split where he is absorbing the other within him, like the other is absorbing the colonial tradition within him. It works both ways. So we will see that, we will see how it happens. So the natives, we can see they are represented from the Western point of view, of course, and both of Hari Babu, who is one of the prominent characters of the novel, and Mahbub Ali again, who is an Afghan. They're both Orientals, and they both work for the British Secret Service as interpreters and spies. And in so doing, they risk their life for the sake of British Empire. However, they are not treated with respect. They're described in a way to make the readers feel that they consider themselves to be inferior. And here we have an example from Hari Babu. He says that I am only a Babu. I am unfortunately Asiatic, and also I am Bengali. As if all of these things are something worthy of an insult. As if something, these are all inferior qualities when standing in comparison to the white colonizer. And we have another example, as you can see in front of you. So it is as if, however Occident or however westernized, however like the British you want to become, you work towards becoming or persevere to become, even if you are Western educated, even if you are working for them in the secret services, you will be, if you are an Oriental, you will never completely be British. The author Kipling deprives his native characters from the British identity in a way to say that Orientals can never ever claim the British identity. The giving of identity is controlled by Kipling, of course, since he is the colonizer over here, since he is the representative Occident over here. Why he does so, again, as I said, we will see very soon. So you have over here, we have a short historical background which we will learn about more shortly, because at that point of time you will see when he was writing, the educated Indians were considered a threat to the British government. They were because they were the new social class that was rising in the country of India, social class that was not deprived of the very education which the British were propagating as their own. But education, we know, works in funny ways. If you are educated in accordance to any particular principle, that very education will work towards dismantling the bad order of those principles. Education gives you a sense of doubt, and it gives you a structure wherein you can put that doubt and prove that your doubts are correct. So in a very similar fashion, even if these Indians were educated by the British, by the Western system of education, they, being Indians, being Orientals, if I may say so, they could not let go of the blood and the tradition in the blood, the history of tradition in their blood that they carried. And they became challenging, or they became a new social order that was a threat to the British Raj, to the East India Company, to the Elizabethan rule, to the rule of Elizabeth that was carried out in India. They became an increasing threat. If you remember your history lessons from school, you will remember that there were two kinds of revolutionaries. The first were the moderates. They were called the moderates, and they were the first class of educated Indians who formed the INC, or the Indian National Congress. They believed in seeking a co-position or peaceful coexistence with the British. They wanted Swaraj, and when there was another section of educated Indians who came after them, that comprised of Bhagat Singh and Rajguru, the popular revolutionary heroes that we see on big screen in movies. They wanted Purna Swaraj, that is, they wanted complete independence with an Indian constitutionalized democracy, rather than what the moderates wanted. They wanted to be under the British rule, yet they wanted to be independent, to have an independent rule, but they would be under the overall control of the crown, that is the crown that is Queen Elizabeth in England. So these were the basic differences, and the first part and the first group of people. They were the rising social order who were educated in Western education, and they were distributing pamphlets, and they were writing books, and they were publishing newspapers. They were progressing the revolutionary ideas. They were seeking to come somewhat away from complete control of the British, and so they became an increasing threat to the British rule. See, as it is written, in reality they were feared by the British government and considered as being a threat, since they propagated the feeling of nationalism within Indians and created nationalist groups that helped raising the voice. It will be raising, I'm sorry, that helped raising the voice of nationalism in India. The native subordination throughout the novel is mainly embedded in the character of the Lama. As if you have read the novel to some extent, you will understand. Though the Lama is a native, Kipling has given him voice, which the giving of voice, the recording of alien voices, which we were talking about in the last class from the essay Invisible Bullets. So Kipling, as an author, as an imperial colonial author, he included the alien voices, which was, as I had mentioned in the last class, a function of imperialism, a function of the imperial project. Yes. So the purpose of this privilege stands, of course, in our favor, in favor of Orientalism, which something I also mentioned in the last class, because it is the recording of the same alien voices, that served as a function of the imperial recordings, that was also to be used later on by critiques of the British society, because these voices are now being scrutinized. They have been scrutinized from quite some time after post publication of Orientalism, post Edward Said. These alien voices have been scrutinized, they have been deconstructed, they have been visited, revisited, and revised again and again to bring out the different perspectives of the other, to bring out the different perspectives of the Orientals. As argued by Said throughout the novel, Kipling is clear to show us that the Lama, while a wise and a good man, needs Kim's youth, his guidance, his wits. The Lama even explicitly acknowledges his absolute religious need for Kim. So here again, Kipling wins. Kipling, as an imperial author, wins, because even though he includes the alien voices of the Lama and other natives in the novel, Edward Said shows us that Kipling had a hidden politics behind inclusion of these voices, because even if he gave the Lama a voice, even if he engaged in dialogue with the Lamas, with the Lama, it was to the purpose, to the end, that the Lama is religiously dependent upon Kim, who is again a metaphor, a representative of the author himself. So even this is a war, this is a constant battle that goes on between imperialism and Orientalism. Imperialism will always be inclusive of the other voices, and Orientalism, as a deconstructing theory, will always pay close attention to those recorded voices in order to bring about varied interpretations. So this is a constant battle, as you can see. And here I have given you certain example, another example of the Lama's dialogue. Kipling makes the Lama play the role of a subordinate, and when Kim moves, the Lama moves. In a scene from chapter 1, Kim says to the Lama, "Come, it is time to go to Banaras." The Lama rose obediently. Now that is important. This obedience is very important. So even if you have a voice, you have to be obedient to the British Raj. That is the politics of as I told you in the last class, that is the politics of recording, the purpose behind the recording of alien voices, so that these subversions, such as the Lama, who himself is spiritually educated, who is religiously elevated, even though that is a form of subversion, this subversion is being contained by the imperial author Kipling himself. So this is where I would like to end my discussion upon the representation of natives. See, I will be moving from topic to topic, so it does not mean the representation and the politics of representation, it ends here. all the ideas are linked together, they are not isolated from each other. So these are just very prominent examples that I am giving you to prove to you that this is happening in the novel. So I have, as you can see, I have concentrated on the very first few chapters of the novel. The rest of the work you have to do, so that I can move on to the next topic. So the next topic we will discuss together is the consciousness of the author himself. Since imperial literature, it works, according to new historicism, it works as containing the subversions present in a colonized nation. It is imperative for us, it is most important for us to analyze the mind of the author, the imperial author, who functions for the entire project of imperialism. The author, the British author here, Rudyard Kipling, represents the imperial ideology of Europe, and he is creating literature based on that very same perspective of the imperial ideology, literature which is recording the voices, the voices of the others, the voices of the colonized in the nation of India, yet using those varied voices, using those various points of view to perpetuate its existence, to circulate its own idea of the other land, of the other colonized nation, of the other colonized natives. And that is why it is very important for us to understand the consciousness of the author himself, or what kind of an internal structure pushes him towards such representation, towards such a function, towards such a circulation. So let's see. Up till now, is it clear? Does anyone have anything to ask? Okay, nothing then. Yes. So this is, we have over here Something of Myself, which is an autobiography by Kipling. It was first published in 1937. So I am quoting an extract from Something of Myself. Pay very close attention to the language that is used, the way that Kipling puts forward his thoughts. This image of a carefully structured and furnished ship, this is an image of a ship that he presents to describe the ideal fiction, that is the idealized form of fiction. What should fiction be like? Kim is, after all, a fiction. It is not a biography, it is not a travelogue, it is a fictional piece of writing, fictional realist novel. So here in his autobiography, he compares this ship is a metaphor for the ideal fiction, the perfect fiction. And this image recalls his privileged use of other orderly structures, such as the empire. He uses the empire to create fiction, and other orderly structures that control, protect, and contain disorderly structures, like India. So if the ship stands for the empire, which requires ideal fiction to be created, then the disorders, then the sea, with all its troubles, it stands for India, that ironically sustain it. And in the relationship he imagined between the sea and the ship, between the ship and the sea, specifically in the hope that the sea might nowhere meet resistance or weakness, as you can see, with the hope that the sea might nowhere meet resistance or weakness, we can learn about his awareness that conscious mechanisms of earth, the fact that he purposefully wants to create a fiction, conscious mechanisms of art, they rely on unconscious structures. Too much resistance to the sea would represent Kipling at his weakest, so absorbed in his craft that his art becomes mechanical. Kipling's art, like all art, lies in the interplay between the sea and the ship, between the unconscious and the form of fiction, form that functions sometimes as defense against and sometimes as an expression of that unconscious. So if, again I'm revising, so if the image of the ship is the empire and the image of the sea is India, and Kipling uses various aids from his empire. Of course, he was aided by the empire. He belonged to the imperialist project. So if that is his unconscious, his dependency upon the empire, it is his unconscious, and the art of, and the fact that he is writing, his act of writing, that represents his consciousness. So what I want to prove over here is that art, Kipling's novel Kim, as an art or any work of art, it is not a very static relationship between the consciousness and the unconsciousness. It is not very static. It is a dynamic relationship that is constantly in flux. Because thinking, if you are to write fiction, you need to have a certain plot line, you need to have a climax, you need to have a resolution, you need to have proper characters and development of the characters in that realist novel, because that is what the genre specifies. If you're writing a realist novel, which we learned in the last class was the best form of extending the imperial propaganda, so that form of writing, the realist writing, also has its own structure, has its own requirements. And in order to fulfill that, in order to write the ideal fiction, Kipling as an artist needs to show the turbulent relationship that exists between the ship and the sea, between the empire and India, and also between his own subconsciousness and the consciousness, between his own unconsciousness and consciousness. So we learned three levels over here. The ship is standing for the empire and also for his unconsciousness, that is the artist's mind and the artist's resources. And the sea stands for India and also the consciousness of the writer. That is the writer's freedom, artistic, creative freedom that any artist should have and does have in this case, and also his and also the author's need to create an ideal fiction which needs to be interesting and cannot be interesting without a conflict, which was very real at that point of time, given the underlying story of the novel, the historical context of the novel, the cultural context of the novel. It was a very turbulent time, and the turbulent relationships existed between the colonizer and the colonized all over. So this consciousness and this art represents the artist's urge, the artist's need or desire to create an ideal fiction which cannot be devoid of the conflict, any conflict. And this was the conflict that existed at that point of time, a conflict between imperial endeavors and the rising educated social class of that time. And Kipling, as a man, as a human being, could not oversee or could not unsee this conflict that was happening. And if we examine further, this image of the ship, it lends itself to understanding the metaphoric construction of the self and culture in Kipling's works or in Kipling himself. Like other obsessively recurring images such as houses and such as sight in his narrative, the ship is an overdetermined symbol because it involves a conflict between two opposing functions. On one level, and in the context of his autobiography, the image is a return of the repressed infancy in which the ship was the instrument of his loss, his fall, and his years of exile and wandering in search of some original lost home. exile and wandering টা বলছি because at that point of time it was a very common ritual or a very common custom to send off young boys. I'm talking about British boys, young boys back to Europe, young boys born in India back to Europe for gaining education, and then they would be brought back. So here, if we are studying, if we are psychoanalyzing, then we can say that this ship, which stands for the empire and also his unconsciousness, also stands for the feeling of loss that he encountered when he was not in India, when he was away from India, which he considers to be his original home. The fact that he was born there and the fact that he was to live here for the rest of his life after his return to India. So that was his lost home. And this ship is also metaphoric for the repressed desire of a home. Repressed desire, if you remember Freud, the portions which I had taught you, repressed desire which always comes in front in some or the other way, but is hidden from infancy, from childhood. So the ship, the empire, is also a metaphor for his lost home. It stands, it reminds him of his feeling of loss when he was in exile. According to him, he felt like he was exiled. So it represented that sense of loss, that sense of exile that he felt when he was away from India, when he was sent away from India. And that non-rational, painful level of the symbol, concealed and denied because of its matrix of fear and anguish, is opposed by the adult and rationalized status of the status of the symbol, by his recognition of the ship as a symbol of order, control, art, and civilization, and as a construct that masters the sea. And a very thinking according to the Freudian lines of analysis, the fact that during his childhood he felt lost and he felt exiled, and the ship as a metaphor for this feeling of loss was repressed. Of course, repressed. Why? Because if Kipling, as a young white boy, told his peers, told his guardians, who were also white members of the white imperialist project, if he expressed this fear, what would they think of him? It's very clear. If you are living in India, just take a very common example. If you have a friend who is a supporter of the English cricket team, and he is sitting in his family full of 10 to 12 people watching a match between India and England, and if this boy or this girl reveals his or her his or her own passion towards a different country, towards England, then imagine the reaction of all the other family members in that room. So, and now imagine this in a very macro level, in the level of imperialism and in the level of ruling over different countries. So if he told his peers about his fear, about the sense of fear that he feels, the sense of loss that he feels for India, he would be ostracized. And this is precisely the reason because why these things or these ideas are repressed from infancy. And as Kipling grew, as he was educated in the Western education of enlightenment, of rationality, of transcendental idealism according to Kant, according to Rousseau, of all the Western philosophies that were aiding in the imperialist project, he grows up and he absorbs them. And this same metaphor, this same symbol of the ship now stands changed. Now this symbol stands for something that controls the sea. And therefore, Kipling also needs to be in control of his desire, and therefore those repressed wishes, that desire of home in India, that desire of that feeling, that sense of loss that he felt when he was going away from India, they are all now permanently repressed. But when he is writing, when he is engaging in the act of writing, as Jacques Derrida puts it, then at that very moment he puts the pen and its ink on paper, he becomes a revolutionary. Revolutionary not only to the culture outside, but also to the culture that is inside of himself, that his utterance, his written word speaks of the conflict, of this conflict that exists within him, that sense of loss during infancy and that sense of control during adulthood. His writing also preserves this.
Ma'am,
Bolo.
can I ask something? It might sound a little deviating from the topic,
Okay, sure.
but just now you mentioned a reference to Derrida. What was that? I mean, I don't know about
Derrida.
it. So if you could explain the reference to that.
Yes, sure. See, Derrida, I will be very short about it, otherwise it will take a lot of time. So Derrida, in Of Grammatology, he writes about that is his first most influential book, where he expounds his theory of deconstruction and where he mentions his own philosophy as opposed to the Western philosophy. So he says that writing is an act of difference. Particularly, he says writing is an act of difference. How is it? What is difference? Forget difference. He says that writing is an act of difference. Just put it in plain English. Writing is an act of difference. Now, different from what? See, he was opposing the classical Western ideology. Classical Western ideology or classical Western literature, of course, I am considering literature as a representative of that ideology. Classical literature, Western literature comprised of rhetorics, right? Plato, Homer, all of these people, particularly Plato, they paid a lot of attention to rhetorics, to speaking. ঠিক আছে, তখনকার দিনে আর কি in classical England trainings were given. You would be trained as a rhetorician. You would be trained how to speak, and a lot of importance was given to that presence, to the presence of a speaker. That presence becomes the primordial aspect of the ideology, that being present is most important to Western ideology according to Derrida. And Derrida says that whenever you adopt a different mode, that is of writing rather than speaking, you remove that presence. The speaker is no longer there because you cannot see the writer, and writing stays on for years and years and years, even after the original writer is dead. So it is an absence that governs writing as opposed to a presence that governs speaking. And herein Derrida says that writing becomes then an example or an act of difference. Difference, I am saying over here. Difference means two things. It is both to differ from the original text, that is writing as differing from the original mode of speaking, and also a deference, that is writing also includes some form of speaking. It also includes some form of presence of the writer, but it also includes absence of the writer, and wherein we can welcome the reader's interpretation. So writing is both the absent and the present. Writing is an act of differing from speaking, differing from the overwhelming presence, and deferring, that is showing respect to the presence of other voices, to the somewhat presence of the speaker. I have put it very simplistically. This is what Derrida immediate context আর কি বোঝাতে গেলে this is what Derrida says in Of Grammatology. And that is why I said over here that the act of writing for Kipling, this opened the gates to express, to perhaps subconsciously express the conflict that was going on in his own mind, which again represented the actual historical conflict that was going on at that point of time. বুঝতে পেরেছো? Is it clear? Does anyone have any?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, we are saying that when Derrida says writing is the act of difference, it is very similar to people trolling celebrities or different people or a variety of people, writing a lot of various things which they would choose not to say it in public.
Yes, of course, writing can be politicized as well. It can be used negatively as well. And nowadays, in an age of social media and social interaction and online social relations, writing can be used in more derogatory functions than Derrida could ever imagine at that point of time. এখনকার দিনে যেরকম ভাবে we employ the method of writing in order to hide ourselves, that is completely different to the notion that Derrida propounded. But yes, of course, being a person of today and not a person of when Derrida was, not a person of that age, you can obviously put that perspective into order. That is not wrong at all.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So apatatto up till now, is it clear? All right. So it is this need to build a mythology. It is this need to build a story of the self with, of course, the self. আমি বলেছিলাম ফ্রয়েড পড়ানোর সময় that the self is also that which it is not. The self is the other also. এটা আমি বলেছিলাম, I will expand that again in another class, not today though. So just remember, the self is also inclusive of the other. The self also includes which it is not. However, the other is always defined as a lack. Mane, if there are two things, if there is a self and if there is the other, defining the self will also include the other, but defining the other will not include the self. That is what puts the self in a privileged position and puts the other in an underprivileged or deprived position, very fundamentally speaking. And it is this Kipling's need to create, to build the mythology of the self, that writing becomes for Kipling a sort of empire building, a process of expansion and re-territorialization. That is also what empire building was. It was a re-territorialization, building new territories. তোমরা যদি ওই যে বলো এই চাঁদের পাহাড়, কার লেখা ওটা একটু আমাকে প্লিজ মনে করিয়ে দাও। শরৎচন্দ্র, তাই তো? চাঁদের পাহাড়টা কার লেখা?
বিভূতিভূষণ।
আই এম ভেরি সরি, ইয়েস, বিভূতিভূষণ বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়, ঠিক ঠিক ঠিক। তো ওইখানেই মানে তোমার পরের যে ইয়েটা ছিল আর কি, তোমার আমি পরের পার্টটা আর কি দেখছিলাম, কোনো না কোনো কারণে আর কি দেখছিলাম বইটা, যাই হোক। তো ওইখানে আমি দেখলাম যে there was a western person over there and he mentioned that the Amazon, that was the terra incognita. Terra incognita means the territory that is incognito, or something that cannot be seen, that cannot be witnessed, cannot be studied, dissected, deconstructed, etc., etc. So empire building was also belonged to this strain of philosophy, to this strain of outlook, that you move towards the terra incognita and re-territorialize them, create new lands over the existing land. That is what the empire, or the British Empire or imperialist project, was all about. And land with all its culture and all its tradition and all its whatever and whatnots. So everything was to be rebuilt. And writing over here for Kipling, it becomes an extension of this empire building. And if we consider the relationship of the autobiography to self-control as analogous to that of colonialism to world politics, Kipling's fiction will further reflect the complexity of positions framed by the private and the political, by the illusion of an indefinitely expanding empire, and by the real boundaries necessary to the political functioning of the nation state. That means, what is it? That if the British Empire was busy or was had the single-minded objective of controlling the world, then controlling the world, but the world with its political divisions, of course, the world being divided because of the reasons, for the very reasons that they have been divided politically, physically, culturally, etc., etc. So the British wanted to control the world, yet they were faced with this dilemma, with this ever increasing conflict of maintaining the real boundaries of growing nations. So India, being a part of the world, is also a country in its own right, having its own political boundaries, its own cultural boundaries, its own states made accordingly, made in accordance to various needs. So the British Empire, which was trying to control the entire world, failed when it came to controlling the real boundaries that were created in the course of time. They were trying to control the mind, as I said, but there were growing splits, there were growing vacancies within that mind itself that required later scholars and critics to decolonize the mind as well, and not just the territory, not just the land. So Kipling's fiction, that is Kim, is therefore a representative of this conflict of the empire, conflict within the empire, because Kipling was both of the empire and within the empire. He acted from within the empire as a representative of the empire, but at the same time he was also in a very closely affiliated and a very romantic relationship with the country in which he was born, specifically Lahore. And he was very much invested emotionally and sentimentally into that nation state, and he could not look away from those sentiments which existed in his own heart, repressed as they were, and even though he felt the need to control them, the piece of art which is a fiction, and which gives any artist the space or the opportunity to play, to dance as he or she wants it. This is where he shows the conflict within his own mind as well. I hope I have been clear enough. Okay, so I wanted to start with Kipling's mind, otherizing and otherized, but I want to finish it also. আমি মানে শুরু করলে আমি থামতে চাইছি না. So I think that I want that I should stop over here. Otherwise, it will take like another hour, and I don't want to do that. So I am keeping it till here, and we have the next class just tomorrow. So মাঝখানে খুব একটা বেশি গ্যাপ তো থাকবে না, and